I volunteer with a wildlife conservation group. In a nutshell, we patrol some pretty out-of-the-way areas and sometimes stay the night in the forest. In the fall of 2014, I was showing 2 brand new recruits around this really isolated area. We drove in on an old logging trail, and by the time we got there, it was nearing dark. The actual spot I was showing them was about a 20-minute hike. When we eventually got there, one of them, an 18-year-old female, decided to come with me, and the other, a 19-year-old male, stayed in the truck because he said he wasn't comfortable walking through the woods in the dark. This is volunteer, so whatever. I walked down to a river with one of the recruits, using flashlights. We took a quick look around, and then we got back a little under an hour later. The guy who stayed was looking at us like we were crazy. He began asking where we went, with a terrified look on his face. I pointed in the direction where we went, and he said, "No," and pointed to the other side of the trail. He told us that we were walking through the woods back there as he pointed into the woods opposite to us. Because he was a little on edge and it was getting dark, I assumed that he just saw an animal or something, and after a few awkward moments, we decided to head back out. Not much further down the trail, we came across a fair-sized tree in the road that wasn't there before. He began exclaiming, "I told you so! I fucking told you so!" Beginning to feel a little uneasy, I began to slow down and reach for my door handle to get out and take a look at our obstacle. When through the dim light coming from the taillights of our truck, I could clearly see someone jumping from the bush behind us and sprinting for the truck. I began cursing as I hit the gas and ran our truck over the tree, sending everything in the cab flying everywhere. Both rookies were yelling as I sped down the horribly unkept logging trail. Eventually I slowed down and we drove back to the office in complete silence. By the time we got back, it was around 1:30 a.m. I called one of the group managers and explained what had happened. We decided not to call anyone because nothing extremely illegal happened. Nobody was hurt, and it just wasn't worth wasting our resources to go out there for nothing. I was called the next day and informed that both recruits had quit. To this day, I have no idea what that was about. I chose to believe that it was just some late-night logger who was just as surprised as we were. That's the only explanation that lets me sleep at night. When I was 6 years old, my favorite thing to do was explore the woods by my house. I never went into the thicket alone. My friend Ethan liked to join me, but sometimes it was just me and my neighbor Katrina, who was 7 at the time. To get to the woodsy area, you first had to cross a large fallen tree over a small ravine, something that I would never do now, but at that age, I was fearless. My friends and I spent many days daring each other to cross back and forth over the tree without using our arms for balance. On one dreary summer day, I asked Ethan and Katrina to explore with me, but Ethan wasn't feeling too well, so we decided to stay home. Katrina and I set off to the obscure path that led to the fallen tree and spent a couple of hours in the woods. I remember the smell of the woods and the damp, slippery feel of the leaves beneath our feet. It had rained the night before, and the woods were electric with the sounds of birds chirping and water rushing through the ravine. We were entranced. I guess that's why we didn't hear the man approach us. My first thought was to get the hell out of there. I knew all about stranger danger, and I just had this weird feeling about the middle-aged man. Before I could tell Katrina what I was thinking, the man told us that we looked like great explorers and that he could really use our help. He said his puppy ran off into the woods and she wouldn't be able to take care of herself, so it was really important that we find her soon. I hesitated, but Katrina has always had a weakness for puppies, so she agreed to help him look. We set out to look for the missing puppy, but I just kept getting this weird feeling. Every time we walked towards the direction the man came from, he would tell us that he already looked over there and that we should keep to the other side. By that time, I was done. I was ready to nope the fuck out of there, but Katrina would not budge. I told her that I was leaving, and she told me that she was going to stay. I wanted to beg her to come with me, but I decided to leave without her because I couldn't stand being there any longer. I jogged back through the woods, careful not to slip on any of the damp leaves, but the fallen tree was covered in them, so I had to tiptoe my way across. Halfway across, a chill went through my body, leaving a trail of goosebumps on my skin, and I ran. I ran so fast that I forgot how slippery the log was. So I didn't realize that I was falling into the ravine until I had already hit the rocky bottom. I heard a loud crack and looked down to see that my femur was broken and sticking through my skin. Things got foggy after that, but I guess I screamed loud enough for the closest neighbors to call 911. I'm just happy that I screamed loud enough to save Katrina. The police and EMTs found me lying in the ravine, crying and grasping at my broken leg. The last thing I remember was pointing towards the woods and telling them to look for Katrina. I woke up the next day with my leg hooked up to the ceiling and traction in a world of pain. My mom was holding my hand, and she said that when I was ready, the police would like to talk to me. I asked if I was in trouble, but she said it wasn't anything like that. They just needed to ask me a few questions. A policeman came in and asked if I had seen a man in the woods before I broke my leg. I recounted the events that happened and asked if they had found Katrina. They had. When I left, the man started asking Katrina about her family and if she had any big scary brothers that would come looking for her if she was out too late. Their conversation was cut off by my screams, and Katrina immediately ran towards the sound. Luckily, the man's reflexes weren't as fast, and though he tried, he never caught up with her. She said that when she looked around at the end of the woods, he was running back into them. She thought that maybe he was going to get help. Turns out, there was no lost puppy. The police never found the creepy man, but they did find a bag hidden in the bushes by where we first spotted him. Inside the bag was some rope, duct tape, and a pair of binoculars. Sometimes I have nightmares about what could have happened that day, and even now I get chills when I go into the woods. To give some explanation and background knowledge for this whole encounter, I was around 15 at the time this occurred. I was camping out in the middle of nowhere with my family and part of my extended family, being my aunt, uncle, and cousins. I was the oldest kid in the RV, so you can probably understand how it felt to have no one else do the stupid crap I did back then with. With a good 2-year gap between me and the inferiors, it was almost like nirvana when I got to the campground and met other teenagers. These were all people we knew fairly well from previous camping trips, so it was considered normal to hit it off with them from the start and act like we've known each other forever within the hour. Now, on to the story. My parents trusted me a lot, no lie. I liked my fun, but I also liked getting home in time for dinner equally as much. So when I was gone for most of the day with other people from the camp, they didn't think much of it. The only rule was that I had to be back at the RV in time to eat dinner, and before 8:30 in the evening. So picture this, a group of 6 teens, all 15 to 16, out in the middle of the woods with no adult supervision for the vast majority of the day. Just a recipe for success right there. On this particular day, we found a neat little deer trail that we hadn't seen in the 2 years we had been out there before. On second thought though, it didn't really seem like a deer trail. It snaked through a really thick part of the underbrush. Maybe a foot of clear ground, clear of any branches going upwards. It's a really hard thing to pick out of the brush, unless you either were really looking or know where it is already. It was promptly explored, marked with a broken branch outside the entrance, and quickly forgotten. Except I remembered this little special tunnel. That night, while we were all eating dinner, one of the adults proposed that we played Manhunt out in the woods at night. Not everyone was totally on board with this idea, but in the grand scheme of the plan, they were all squashed down like autumn leaves. Everyone got a flashlight, and everyone was assigned to a team. For those of you who aren't sure what Manhunt is, here's an explanation. Everyone that is playing is given a flashlight. Then we're divided up into 2 groups. It's basically like a glorified flashlight tag, but there's a catch. As you catch people, you have to correctly identify who they are. And if you can, they join forces with the hunters. The last man standing gets a candy bar or something, whatever is being offered as a prize. This is how we played it anyways. For the first round, I get lumped in with the runners, those who are getting chased by the hunters. We get a 5-minute head start to run, climb up a tree, whatever the hell we want to do to evade the hunters. Usually, I'm the one up in the tree, but that never really worked out as the winning spot. So, to try to score a win for once, I decide to play the cat and use one surefire method of escape, and the hiding spot was the rude little path through the thicket. It took most of the head start time to find the damn thing because it was so well hidden and out of the way. As I passed a few hiding spots, I heard hushed, smothered whispering between siblings who were questioning my actions, like a bird's wings rustling when it's fluffing itself. It should be noted that I have bat hearing. My ears are possibly my greatest asset in this game. When I'm just reaching the destination, I hear the short blast of an air horn announcing that 5 minutes are up. I swan dove into this little path in the undergrowth, shuffling on my hands and knees until I'm about halfway in, crouching down like some huge malformed quail. The hunters are doing an initial sweep through the trails, looking for obvious hiders and people trying to change spots. When they finally reach me, they reach the dead end and go straight back. I try to readjust myself and crawl further into the tunnel. I honestly don't know how it happened, but I found an even more hidden path behind that one. And accidentally, I dragged my stupid body down the rabbit hole, except instead of ending in a dead end, this one ended in a slight hollow. I don't want to describe exactly what I found there. I'm sorry, I just can't. It was a younger looking woman, naked, covered in lacerations and stab wounds, in the fetal position. Her glassy, glazed eyes seemed to look straight through me. I won't go any further than that. I was too scared to scream. I froze there while dark burgundy stains formed on my jeans. I stood there in a pseudo-catatonic position like a marble carving for what seemed like hours, and then I heard someone else coming along that path. Have you ever been so scared for that one moment, that one insane moment, you truly consider something incredibly stupid as a valuable option to escape? That was one of those moments. I let out a short, trembling whimper and started moving. Whoever was on the path stopped and then eagerly started moving forward again. I could hear the panting, uneven breaths of a man. It was getting closer and closer to me by the second. By some wondrous, beautiful miracle, he missed the path leading to the brushy hollow. I heard him moving down past the entrance, dragging something clunky and awkward behind him. I heard clinking noises and the occasional effort to silence the small, sharp noises. I heard a low curse somewhere towards the end of the tunnel, and I blasted out of the undergrowth like a bullet forcing its way out of a barrel. Cracks, crashes, and obnoxious rustling was all around me as I heard the man sharply intake a breath and begin to move towards me. The hoarse, deep panting was getting closer and closer to me, a testament of how I was too slow at exiting. Somehow I exploded out of the entrance, got onto my wobbly, half-asleep legs, and started booking it down the trail. The unknown pursuer was close behind me for a bit, but it seemed that he was too exhausted to chase me at that same speed for long. I know everyone loves to rip on the fact that people always trip in horror movies, but honestly, tripping is something that I'm amazed I didn't do. With adrenaline coursing through me at the speed of a Usain bolt, trying to make my jello-like, unsteady walking appendages work to move away from whoever was behind me was like trying to run on water. It felt like an eternity, but I finally reached the main entrance running back into the camp. And I sprinted down it screaming bloody murder. Focused faces looked out from the trees, and I think someone called after me. Reaching the camp was easy, but trying to explain why I woke up half the people in the camp and bolted out of the woods at breakneck speed was harder. When I finally choked the words out to explain, I remembered a profound, insidious silence throughout the group of adults waiting at the mouth of the trail. I don't really remember a whole lot from that point on. I know the cops were called, and my mother and aunt ran shrieking and wailing along the trail, trying to get the other kids to come back to safety. When someone's yelling like that, you don't ignore it. They rounded everyone up in 30 seconds flat and barreled back into the camp. The police found a man out in the woods, creeping along the trail, clutching a knife and a black garbage bag with a plethora of sharp instruments, and they also found a saw that was abandoned on the trail with some speckled and smeared dried blood on it. I don't really think that there's any getting over this. I still have nightmares sometimes of the man chasing me, breathing heavily down my neck, trying to catch me, and sometimes he succeeds. This happened circa 1971 or 1972, when my mother was about 14 or 15 years old. The incident occurred in a heavily wooded area near Birmingham, Alabama. My mother is the oldest of 5 children. She has 3 sisters and a brother, who is the baby of the family. One weekend in the cooler months of the fall, my grandfather decided to take the whole family, my grandmother, my mother, and all the aunts and uncles, so 7 people total, into the woods for target practice with a rifle. My mother grew up quite poor, and they didn't always live in the best of neighborhoods, so my grandfather wanted to teach the kids how to defend themselves with a rifle, if need be. Like I said, it was later in the fall, so the trees were bare and there were lots of leaves on the ground. The wooded area is just off a dirt road, so this was a fairly isolated area that they were in. Since it was so far off the beaten path, my grandfather became startled when he heard a roar of a car engine so deep in the woods. My mother remembers the car being a blue Ford Galaxy, so it kind of looks something like this. Despite the fact that my grandfather had a gun, he totally freaked out and told my grandmother and the kids to hide under a pile of leaves in the woods. He hid with them. The man in the driver's seat got out, dragged a woman's body out of the car, and just dumped her there in the woods and drove away. After my grandfather was sure the man was gone, everyone came out of hiding, and the woman sat up and stared at them straight in the face. My grandfather asked the woman if she needed help. She said no and that she would be fine. She didn't seem to be injured and obviously didn't want help. She hadn't put up a fight with the man when he was dragging her out of the car. She must have known him or something. So my grandfather cut the shooting lesson short and decided to rush the kids home to safety. Well, on the trail back to the dirt road where my grandfather had parked their car, they passed the man in the blue Ford Galaxy driving out of the woods. My mom looked over and noticed that he had a huge machete laying across the front seat beside him. My grandfather made sure that the man could see that he was carrying a rifle, but everyone was careful not to give away what they had just seen. The man struck up a small talk with my grandfather, asked him how he was doing and what they were doing out in the woods. My grandfather explained that he had just taken his family out for some target practice with the rifle. The man told him to have a nice day and continued driving. The next day, my grandfather went back out to that spot in the woods. There was not a body there. However, he did find the woman's wig, her purse, some Kleenex, and a pair of eyeglasses. He collected the items and took them home. According to my grandfather, that area of the woods was known for having shallow graves and being a dumping site for bodies. My mother became hysterical when he walked in the door carrying that stuff. She started screaming, "He killed that lady! He killed that lady!" My grandfather ended up taking the items to the police station, but my mom doesn't think anything ever came of it. She never heard anything else about it after that. Well, she did hear one other thing about it. Early the next morning, my grandmother called my mom when she arrived at work. Just before the kids left for school, she told them not to take the bus that day and that she would come home and pick them up and drive them to school. When my mom asked why, my grandmother said, "Because that car is waiting for you at the bus stop." It was March during spring break. I was 16 at the time, and me and about 20 other people went out into the woods in Surrey County and got a cabin on this nice little retreat center. We planned on staying there for 4 days. For a bit more detail, the cabin was surrounded on all sides by woods. To the west of the cabin were some hunting trails and a creepy abandoned trailer next to a small clearing with a single pine in the center. To the east was a large field. At the far end of the field, there is a slope leading down to a beach. When going down the slope to the right, there is an acre of higher elevation, and to the right of that was a valley that could be accessed from the beach. Anyway, on the last night, a group of about 8 of us decided that we would go down to the beach and sit around and sing songs while playing guitars. It was about 11 p.m. and everything was going fine, and then 3 of the guys decided that they would head back to the cabin to go get some food. They had been gone for about 10 minutes before one of the guys got a call from his brother. His reaction to the call made it seem like something had happened or someone was hurt. When he got off the phone, he said, "We all have to leave, right fucking now," in a very hushed and panicky voice. We all asked why he told us that, and apparently, while the others were walking back, they found a rabbit at the top of the trail, and its head had been cut clean off. Not ripped off like an animal's doing, but cut like someone had took a knife to the rabbit. So we automatically thought they have to be fucking with us. We all began to walk back, brandishing the guitar and metal pipe as weapons in case they weren't fucking with us. About halfway up the hill, we hear rustling and twigs snapping to our right where the valley is. It sounded like someone was walking up the side of a very steep slope. We told them to knock it off, and that if it was a joke, it wasn't funny. The movement to the right stopped very suddenly. We kept going once we neared the top of the hill. I turned on my phone's flashlight, and right on the ground in front of me was a rabbit with its head cut clean off. We took off running and heard something coming out of the woods after us. We didn't stop running until we got to the cabin. When we got there, we found all the guys were sitting inside. We locked every door and all the windows. Me and two of the other guys stayed up all night to keep watch to make sure whatever it was didn't follow us back to the cabin. We all fell asleep around 6:30 a.m. When we woke up at 8, someone was flipping their shit about a decapitated rabbit head laying on the front porch by the front door.
Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please share, like, and comment, and become part of the unity by hitting the subscribe button. If you have a scary story that you would like to share, be sure to send it to my email or post it on the free horror stories subreddit. Consider donating to this channel and be sure to follow me on Twitter. And until next time, stay spooky and never forget, there's always a reason to be afraid.